Today's program will focus on a very famous 20th century philosopher and a well-known self-help book he wrote entitled The Conquest of Happiness. The philosopher's name is Bertrand Russell, who also, incidentally, was a very famous mathematician. Early on in this book, again entitled The Conquest of Happiness, Russell points out that when he was a young person, he was very unhappy. In fact, he said he was often on the verge of suicide, but that what kept him going was his interest in mathematics. He claims that as he grew older, that he learned how to be a happy person, and hence he wrote this book, again entitled The Conquest of Happiness, in which he tries to assist others in helping them to lead more fulfilling lives. Before talking about the contents of the book, what I'd like to do is to provide some relevant biographical information on Russell. Russell was born in 1872. He was born in Wales. He later taught philosophy at Cambridge in England, and later taught at Harvard and the University of Chicago in the United States, and also at the University of Beijing. In 1950, Bertrand Russell won the Nobel Prize for Literature. Since this book is about happiness and what we might all do to try to become happier people, I think it would be appropriate at the outset to provide some background from some other thinkers on this topic, because there have been various viewpoints expressed over the centuries by great thinkers in philosophy and literature and psychology and religion on the subject of happiness. And indeed, there's been quite a bit of disagreement about how happy we can be. For example, the ancient Greeks, according to scholar H.D.F. Keto, believed that the gods gave 2 sorrows for every blessing. The Greeks, according to Professor Keto, approached life with an attitude of tragic optimism. Many religions over the centuries have taught that much of life is sorrowful, and that one of the reasons, perhaps the main reason that much of life is sorrowful, is that it's a trial. Henry David Thoreau in Walden, you might recall, penned the following classic words. He said, and I'm quoting him, "The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation." Sigmund Freud was not optimistic about our prospects for happiness, although in a book entitled Civilization and Its Discontents, he said that we should try to be happy, even though he believed, again, our prospects were not very good. Well, Russell serves as a contrast to Freud, because Russell, as far as I can tell, and as far as other commentators on Russell can tell, Russell did believe that our chances for securing greater happiness in life were greater than perhaps what Freud believed. Russell's book, The Conquest of Happiness, is divided into 2 parts. In the first part, he talks about what he considers to be the chief causes of unhappiness in life. And each chapter is devoted to a different major cause of unhappiness as Russell saw it. In the second half of the book, Russell writes about what he considers to be the major causes of happiness in life. And again, each chapter is devoted to a different cause of happiness. What I'd like to do in this program is to focus on the first half of the book, and in next week's program, focus on the second half of the book. Russell claims that one of the chief causes of unhappiness in life is competition. That might strike many Americans as being unusual, strange. I think it's fair to say that we Americans have been taught that competition can be a source of genuine happiness in life. Well, Russell disagreed. In the chapter on competition, he talks about the struggle for life and the different ways in which we compete with other people. And Russell says this, that when people, he says, what people fear what people fear when they engage in the struggle for success, as he calls it, is not that they will fail to get their breakfast next morning, but that they will fail to outshine their neighbors. Russell claims that competition adversely affects the rhythm at which we live. He goes on to say that competition, considered as the main thing in life, is too grim, too tenacious, too much a matter of taut muscles. He says that competition even poisons leisure. And the reason that it poisons leisure is that if one is a very competitive person in various aspects of life, it becomes very difficult to relax. And he says that one may need alcoholic beverages or some other drug to relax. And he specifically alludes to very competitive businessmen and indicates that such people, again, may have real trouble relaxing. What do you think? Russell stimulates our thinking about many dimensions of competition. For example, why do people compete? Why do people compete? Well, there are various reasons, and perhaps different people have different reasons for competing. Alfred Adler, the famous psychiatrist, believed that one of the chief reasons, perhaps the chief reason most people compete, is because of feelings of inferiority. Adler, you might recall, believed that the root of human psychology is the inferiority complex. Indeed, he broke with Freud because of this concept. Freud, as you recall, believed that the root of human psychology, in one way or another, was sex. But again, Adler said, no, it's inferiority feelings. And Adler believed that people often compete to compensate for those feelings of inferiority. Another theory as to why people compete has been expressed by many thinkers, but perhaps the best expression, the most lucid expression of this theory, comes from the French philosopher and religionist Blaise Pascal. Pascal believed that boredom is a major motivation in human behavior, and he believed that people often compete simply because they're bored. As I suggested to you before, there are other motives as well. Another important question concerning competition is this: does competition make us less compassionate and loving? Does competition make us less compassionate and loving? If one is a highly competitive person, isn't there a danger that one will see other people as objects to be beaten, and in so doing may overlook the humanity in others, may not even see the humanity in others? If, for example, one is a highly competitive person, one might see one's neighbor, brother, sister, friend, co-workers as people to be beaten in the quest for status. Another important question concerning competition: should our primary goal in life be to help people or beat people? Again, should our primary goal in life be to help people or to beat people? It's also interesting to examine some of the things that we are encouraged to compete at. What specifically, for example, in our culture, and I suspect in many other cultures, are people encouraged to compete at? Well, I think it's fair to say people are encouraged to compete at sports, they're encouraged to compete in school, and they're encouraged to compete at making money. Would it be fair to say that few people are encouraged to compete at being kinder than other people, at being more decent than other people, at fighting for justice harder than other people fight for justice? Indeed, has one ever heard people such as Gandhi referred to as a winner, or Martin Luther King Jr. referred to as a winner because they fought so hard to secure greater justice in the world? In this context, can one be an honor student without being an honorable person? Can one be an honors student without being an honorable person? Beethoven, the famous composer, had this to say about competition, and specifically about superiority, and how each of us can be superior to another person. Beethoven said this: "I recognize only one sign of superiority in mankind, and that is goodness." I wonder how many Americans agree with Beethoven. Would you want a friend or a relative who's always competing with you? A friend or relative, for example, who is always competing with you to achieve a higher income than you have, a bigger house, a bigger car. Could you have a good relationship? Could you have a good relationship with that kind of a person? Again, with a person who is very competitive. What I'd like to do now is to move on to another major cause of unhappiness, as Russell saw it. I indicated before that each chapter in the first half of the book deals with a different cause of unhappiness, and the first chapter, as I said, deals with competition. Another important cause of unhappiness, according to Russell, are both boredom and excitement. Boredom and excitement, Russell believed, are both important causes of unhappiness. Allow me to explain. First, it should be pointed out that many thinkers have said that boredom is one of the great motive powers throughout history, that people are often motivated by their own boredom and perhaps don't realize it. Russell said this, and I'm quoting him in his chapter on boredom and excitement. He wrote this: "Wars, pogroms, and persecutions have all been part of the flight from boredom. Even quarrels with neighbors have been thought to be better than nothing. At least half the sins of mankind are caused by the fear of boredom." Russell then talks about what he considers to be the proper attitude towards boredom. And here's what he says, and I'm quoting him: "A certain power of enduring boredom is essential to a happy life, and is one of the things that should be taught to young people. All great books contain some boring sections, and all of the great lives that have ever been lived contain some boring stretches." Russell, in his book, alludes to the concept of fruitful monotony. Indeed, that's his expression, fruitful monotony. And he says this, that certain good things cannot happen to us in life unless we can endure fruitful monotony. Allow me to give some examples of what he's talking about here. Russell claims that one cannot learn anything well unless one can endure some boredom. If one wishes to learn a foreign language, or wishes to learn how to play the piano well, or wishes to learn how to write very well, or speak very well, it will usually require a certain amount of repetition, and again, monotony. I dare say that I don't think anybody has ever become an Olympic champion swimmer who has not been able to endure the practice sessions of swimming back and forth in a pool for hours. And perhaps certainly the same thing is true of marathon runners. I suspect